Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the USHCC's third presidential candidate Q&A session. My name is Javier Palomares, and I am the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I have the honor of representing 3.2 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $486 billion to the American economy every year. We also advocate on behalf of 250 major American corporations, and we do this through our network of over 200 local chambers and business associations nationwide. And while the USHCC represents the interests of businessmen and women who happen to be of Hispanic descent, we never forget that we are first and foremost American businesses. And every tax bill we pay, every job we create, every product that we manufacture, and every service we provide goes to benefit our American economy. Now, this event follows headlining stories concerning the involvement of presidential candidates with America's Hispanic community. And as an association that represents millions of Hispanic business owners, we have an accountability to ensure that their voices are heard by each and every candidate, not only as business leaders, but as taxpayers, campaign donors, and ultimately as voters. This Q&A session is the third in a series. Already we've spoken to Senator Ted Cruz and Governor Martin O'Malley. And this forum is meant to set the record straight on a wide array of issues that concern Hispanic Americans. So today we'll be talking about a wide array of issues, including the economy, small business, international trade, immigration, climate change, and equal pay. Frankly, issues that affect all Americans. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Senator Bernie Sanders.
Want me on the left?
Yeah, we usually do this to music.
We love you, Bernie.
Well, Jesus, we haven't even started yet. Thank you. Well, again, thank you very much, sir, for being with us. We've been looking forward to this, and I appreciate you making time to do this. We recognize that obviously you've been very, very busy here of late, so it's important to us that you found the time to do this.
Thank you.
I want to get your take right off the bat on the primary landscape. Now, we know that you've made significant gains since announcing your candidacy, and you're averaging, I think, around 19% in national polls, more or less. However, that still compares to Secretary Clinton at around 60%. So the question is, Mr. Senator, are you, as they say, ready for Hillary? And what do you plan to do to stay viable to win the nomination?
Well, Javier, let me begin by thanking you very much for inviting me. This is a wonderful turnout. Thank you all for being here. We start this campaign and go into this campaign absolutely as an underdog. We make nothing else to say. We are the underdog. If you and I were having a chat three and a half months ago, and you asked me whether I was going to run for president, I would have told you that I really did not know. My wife was not all that excited about the idea. My wife is a very smart woman. So we kind of new into this game. I think it's fair to say that Secretary Clinton has been thinking about this for a lot longer than I have. And let me tell you some of the issues that we were struggling with when we were contemplating whether to get into this or not. And it has everything to do with the answer to your question. Number one, did we have a message that would resonate with the American people? And that message is that for 40 years, the middle class of America has been disappearing while the wealthiest people and largest corporations are doing phenomenally well. And do we need fundamental changes in the way we do economics and politics in America? I thought that that message would resonate. It is resonating. The second question that we had to tackle is that as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which in my view is one of the worst decisions ever rendered by a Supreme Court, which basically says to the wealthiest people in America, you can buy elections. You want to run for office? People will line up and they will give you hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. We knew we would be outspent, but we thought we could raise enough money to run a winning campaign. It turns out that we were right. We have gotten over 300,000 individual contributions. You know what they average? $35 a piece. Now that is a different way to raise money than going to a super PAC where millionaires sit there and put in $500,000 or $1 million or $10 billion. Can we raise enough money to win? I think we can. The third issue is we understood that Secretary Clinton is very, very well known, that we would have to develop a strong grassroots movement. And we are doing that. Just last night, we had 3,500 organizational meetings in every state in this country. We believe that over 100,000 people came out. So to answer your question, you are right. Poll numbers that you gave are right. But we have the momentum. In early states like New Hampshire and Iowa, we are doing significantly better than the national numbers. So I'm not guaranteeing victory, but I think we have a very good chance to win if we can develop that grassroots movement all over this country.
Well, congratulations. I have to say that certainly the message appears to be resonating. So congratulations on calling that one right. Follow-up question. How would you respond to Governor O'Malley's likening your recent surge to that of Donald Trump's, as if saying that both of you are nothing more than a summer flame?
I've been doing what I do for many, many years. And when you have 100,000 people attending meetings last night, when you have rallies in which 8, 10, 11,000 people come out, when you have a website which is being inundated by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are responding to our message that in this great country it is unacceptable that we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major Western country on earth, that we are the only major country that does not guarantee health care to all people as right. We are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee family and medical leave, paid sick leave, paid vacation time, that the rich get richer and everybody else is getting poor. This is not a summer fling. These are issues that are resonating with the American people who very loudly and clearly are saying enough is enough. This economy and our political system belong to all of us and not to a handful of billionaires.
Good response. On to the economy and small business. Now, in a Washington Post article, you stated, and I quote, "I would not deny it, not for 1 second. I'm a democratic socialist." Now, one of the most distinguishing factors of your candidacy is that you have very openly claimed to be a socialist. And while the USHCC kind of stands for a strong free market economy where entrepreneurs should be able to pursue their American dream, with limited, by the way, government regulation, I find it very commendable to see that you're not shying away, not for a second, from your beliefs. In fact, we respect that very much. And at the end, what we respect most of any candidate is transparency and consistency. However, as a business organization, your views do concern me a bit. So the question is, Bernie, how would the Sanders economic platform translate into growth for American small businesses?
Good question. Before I answer this very important question, let me back it up and put it into a context. Before we decide how we go forward, we have to know where we are today. And sometimes we don't discuss that enough. Where we are today is that median family income in America is $5,000 less, almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. Where we are today is that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Where we are today is that 45 million Americans are living in poverty. Where we are today, Javier, is that a recent study came out from the Economic Policy Institute, and this is what it said about youth unemployment. For high school graduates between 17 and 20 who are white, Real unemployment is 33%. Hispanic youth unemployment, 36%. African American youth unemployment, 51%. 35 million people have no health insurance. We have a child care system which is a disaster. Working families, in most cases, are not confident they can find affordable quality child care. That is some of the realities of the American economy today. Now you ask me, am I a democratic socialist? I am. What does that mean? It means that you have the courage to look at countries around the world that are in fact doing things better than we are, just as there are things that we do that are better than what other countries do. And smart people look and steal the best ideas available, right? That's what business people do. I was a mayor. We looked at cities all over America. What ideas? What is San Francisco doing? What is Austin doing? What can we steal? This is what we can steal. From the business perspective, how many of your small business people struggle every day and spend huge amounts of time on health insurance? Correct?
An incredible large portion.
Right. And I would think that a small businessman would like to spend his or her time worrying about their business, how their business is going to grow, not figuring out, talking to 87 different people as to how they're going to get affordable health care for their workers. Yes? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Every other major Western country has health care as a right. Now how about, not only will that be a benefit to the people of this country, it takes the burden off a small business. Is that a good idea? I think it is. We are the only major country that doesn't do that. What about family and medical leave? Today in America, a low-income woman gives birth, she has to get back to work in 5 days. Is that right? Is that morally right? I don't think so. We are the only major country that does not provide family and medical leave. What about education? You know and I know that this country does not grow unless we have a good educational system. There are hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people in America today who desperately want a higher education. They can't get that education. You know why? They can't afford it. That's why I believe we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. I think it helps the business community. It helps America. So when I talk about democratic socialism, I'm saying take a look at what's going on in Sweden. Free college education, free health care. I think it makes sense to look at countries that are doing good things for working families. Taxes, all right? I am sure we may have a disagreement on this.
We may.
We may. But let me be very frank. When you have the most unequal level of income and wealth inequality of any major Western country, when you have major corporations, I'm not talking about small businesses, major multi-billion-dollar corporations stashing their money in the Cayman Islands, not paying a nickel in taxes, I think that that is wrong. And I will do away with those loopholes.
You know, I did, however, want to hear from you in particular, how would President Sanders address the needs of minority-owned businesses, and specifically Hispanic-owned businesses? Can you share a bit about that?
Yes. When real unemployment is as high as it is right now, I think we have got to invest in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And I've introduced legislation that would spend $1 trillion over a 5-year period and create 13 million jobs. Now, as it happens, as I'm sure you're aware, the Hispanic community is in fact heavily involved in construction. I don't know the exact number, but a very significant percentage of Hispanic businesses are involved in construction. If we start rebuilding our roads, our bridges, water system, wastewater plants, this will make America stronger and more efficient, provide millions of jobs, and I think really be a significant boost to the Hispanic community. That's one way I think we can play a role.
Thank you for the response. I'd like to chat about something that we feel very strongly about here at the USHCC, and that's equal pay. As you know, Senator, in this country, women's wages continue to stubbornly lag behind men's, even when doing the exact same job, with women more or less earning about 70 cents on the dollar, and Hispanic women more like 54 cents on the dollar. First of all, why do you think that is? And as president, what would you do to address that disparity?
I think it has to do, to be honest with you, with sexism, that many of the businesses are owned by men. I think it is also part of an historical trend where 50 years ago, 40 years ago, well, women maybe were working for a few hours a week and then they went home and took care of the kids. That reality has changed, as you well know. We have the vast majority of people, of working women, many of them have kids, are now in the workforce. And it is unacceptable, period. Your statistics tell us that we are discriminating against women, and I very much applaud your organization. Not every business organization does that. But to say it is indefensible, I don't know how anyone can defend saying that women make 70 or 78 cents, whatever the number may be, cents per hour compared to men. So I very strongly believe in two things when it comes to pay. One you may agree with me and one you may not.
Okay.
All right. First one I do agree with and have strongly supported in the Senate is we have to move toward pay equity for women workers. End of discussion. Women deserve the same pay as men. We're on the same page.
Agreed.
Where we may not be on the same page is that I believe that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 is a starvation wage and is totally inadequate. So I am supportive of the efforts of Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, of raising the minimum wage over a period of a few years to $15 an hour. I have introduced legislation in the Senate, and its president would fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage.
We're actually on the same page on both counts.
Are we?
We're doing very well.
Hold on.
We're doing very well.
Let me tell you something. All right.
Maybe this isn't a summer fling. Who knows?
All right. No.
Fall
See, this is surprising to me. There are not many, as you know, we are being fought vigorously by many business groups who do not want us to raise the minimum wage. And I applaud you and the organization for having the courage to say that people cannot survive on $7.25 or $8 an hour.
Actually, if you look at the track record of our business owners, again, it's 3.2 million of them collectively contributing about $486 billion to the economy every year and growing at a rate of 3 to 1 when compared to the general market. If you look at their employee base vastly, they are paying much more than the minimum wage to their own employees because of the
I'm going to give you some applause for that. All right.
On to trade.
On to trade.
We were doing really well, but let's go to trade now.
Okay. All right, I've got to go away.
An issue that the USHCC has worked on over the past several months has been, and we don't always agree with the administration, to be clear, but we have agreed on this. We've worked very hard on the administration's trade agenda. So I want to ask you, in light of the fact that 98% of U.S. businesses that do actually export are actually small businesses, we believe that access to more markets abroad is frankly a very good thing for the entrepreneurs that we represent, with more than 95% of the global market being outside of the United States. So the question is, can you tell us a little bit about your concerns with the Trans-Pacific Partnership as it stands today?
Yes. Good question, fair question. And Javier, please do not understand my position as being something that we put a wall around America and we don't trade. Trade is a good thing.
Okay.
The question is, what kind of trade agreements do we establish? Who benefits from those trade agreements? Now, I voted, when I first got into Congress, 1991, at that period NAFTA came up. I voted against NAFTA. I voted against CAFTA. I voted against permanent normal trade relations with China. And you're quite right. I'm helping to lead the opposition against the TPP. Why? What I have always believed, and I think the facts bear me out, is number one, these trade agreements were essentially written by corporate America, the big money interest, by Wall Street, by the pharmaceutical industry. They were not written with the goal of improving life for people in the United States of America. Essentially, what they were written to do was to say to large corporations, okay, you do not have to pay workers in this country 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour. You can shut down in America. You can move to China. You can move to Vietnam. You can move to Mexico. You could pay people substantially lower wages, and you bring your products back into America. I believe that that was the intention of these pieces of legislation, and I believe that that is exactly what has happened. Two things. Since 2001, we have lost almost 60,000 factories in America. And I'm not going to tell you all of that is attributable to trade, but a lot of it is. And second of all, we are in a race to the bottom, so that now companies say to workers, well, you know, if you don't take a pay cut, we're going to go to China, because we have that opportunity in China.
So I believe in trade, but not unfettered free trade. Frankly, I do not believe that American workers should be forced to compete against workers around the world who make pennies an hour. I think that that is unfair. And I can go on longer. I don't want to go on longer. The TPP has additional provisions in it which I do not like. So what I want to see is a trade agreement which works for the middle class and working families of this country as well as people around the world, not just for the CEOs of large corporations.
So a track record against NAFTA, CAFTA, TPP, et cetera, would you classify yourself or characterize yourself as anti-trade?
Nope. I am anti that philosophy of trade agreements. I am anti a trade agreement which results in jobs being lost in America. And let's be clear, we have lost millions of jobs as a result of these trade agreements. I am against that. But I believe we can establish trade policies that work for small business, that work for workers in our country, work for people in other countries. But that has not been the philosophy behind the trade agreements that I have seen in the last 20 years.
Okay, fair enough. On to one of your favorites, financial institutions. The USHCC works very closely with, frankly, the broadest array of financial institutions in this country because they provide billions of dollars every year in SBA loans. They are a reliable source and ready source of credit and capital for our small businesses. However, when it comes to large financial institutions, you have, I think, a similar position to Governor O'Malley's regarding kind of reinstating the Glass-Steagall Act, and which ultimately I think would break up some of the largest banks. By the way, a position that Secretary Clinton does not support. Can you explain to us and my members why we should be supportive of your stance on financial institutions?
Yes, okay. It's a huge issue. Here's where we are. And by the way, this has been my view for a very long time. We have 6 of the largest financial institutions in this country who have assets equivalent, assets of about $10 trillion, which is equivalent to about 60% of the GDP of the United States. So point number one, you have a handful of huge financial institutions that have enormous economic clout. They issue a significant amount of the mortgages in this country and the credit cards in this country. So the first issue is, for a vibrant economy, do we think it is a good idea for a handful of financial institutions to have that much economic clout? Is that what a vibrant free enterprise economy is about? I think not. And to be honest with you, I think if Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, he would come in here and say, you got to break these guys up. They're too big, they're too powerful. Second point, everybody in this room understands what happened in 2008. And let's be very clear. In my view, to a significant degree, the business model of Wall Street is not to get money out to your people, to small businesses. I believe in a boring banking system. People put money into banks. Banks lend out money to small and medium-sized businesses who create jobs, help people buy homes with mortgages. That's called old-fashioned, boring banking. That's what I believe in. What Wall Street has done is create a business model which says we really don't care about small and medium-sized businesses. What we care is about being an island unto ourselves, coming up with the most esoteric financial tools imaginable that nobody in the world knows, but enables Wall Street to make huge, huge amounts of money in highly dangerous and speculative activities. That led us to the Wall Street crash of 2008, which created the worst economic downturn since the Great Recession. I personally believe that the business model of Wall Street is fraud. I do not trust these guys. I do not believe these guys. I do not believe that they care about the economy of America. I think they care about themselves. I want a banking system where you have small, medium-sized banks where your people can walk in and somebody says, I know who you are, I know your history, you're going to get a reasonable price loan. You're part of the community. I know you. I do not want to have people as an island unto themselves, separate from the productive economy. So I believe very much, number one, and this has been my view for many, many years, If you check my record, you will find when I was in the House, I was a member of the House Financial Services Committee that dealt with deregulation. And we had the Clinton people, and we had the Republicans coming before us. And you remember what they said? They said, it's a great idea if we merge investment banks with commercial banks, with large insurance companies. It'll be great for us internationally. I never believed it for 1 second, fought against it. So, to my mind, what we have to do is A, reestablish Glass-Steagall, maintain those separate entities. But second of all, more importantly, we have got to break them up. I think the economy will do much better. I think your people, small businesses, will have access to affordable loans much more readily than is currently the case.
And I want to clarify, I know that when you say your people, you mean American small businesses.
Right.
I know that.
Right. No, that's a big look.
Heckling.
This is a huge issue.
We're going to get to that issue in a second.
Okay.
Energy and the climate.
Good.
Let's talk about energy and climate change. I think this week you challenged Secretary Clinton on the Keystone Pipeline, saying, and I quote, "It's hard for me to understand how one can be concerned about climate change but not vigorously oppose the Keystone Pipeline." So the question is, what is your plan to strike a balance between facilitating business growth, promoting energy independence, while at the same time protecting the environment?
Javier, let me reverse the order of that question.
Okay.
I believe in what Pope Francis said in his recent encyclical. I believe that climate change is the great environmental planetary crisis that we face. And I think that we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet to our kids and our grandchildren. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, in a way that is habitable. So I have to reverse the order of your question. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, how do we do that? Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you that the way you do it is have the United States of America lead the world. We can't do it alone. This is a global problem, working with China and Russia and India and countries all over the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and such sustainable energies as wind, solar, geothermal, and other new emerging technologies. The debate is over. The scientific community has told us loud and clear that climate change is real, caused by human activity, and already causing devastating problems. So for the sake of the planet, how do we go forward? And I think President Obama has made some fighting against a whole lot of people who refuse to even accept the reality of climate change, has made some good initiatives. But we have got to go further if we are going to save this planet and lead the world in transforming our energy system. Number 2, how do you do that? Well, I think one of the ways you do it in terms of energy efficiency is making, in terms of climate change, is moving aggressively toward energy efficiency. Our rail system lags far behind Europe, Japan, and even China. We can take an enormous number of trucks off the road by having a modern rail system. We also need to be weatherizing homes all over this country and buildings as well. We have seen huge growth in solar, despite opposition from Republicans in Congress and in wind. We need to subsidize, provide tax credits for sustainable energy. So to my mind, saving this planet for our kids and our grandchildren, preventing droughts and floods and extreme weather disturbances is a huge priority. And I would invest very heavily in transforming our energy system.
Well, I would argue the point, but since you brought in the Pope on your side of the issue, I mean. So on to race relations. Let's talk about this a bit because, and first, by the way, I want to commend you for your long-standing track record, proven track record, and the work you've done in promoting civil rights and equality for decades, frankly.
Thank you.
And like you, the USHCC believes in fair treatment and inclusion of all communities. But with that said, given the recent protests that transpired at the Netroots Convention, as well as the criticism that you've received for your response to those protests, can you talk to us a bit about this troubling and frankly persistent problem in America? As president, how would you address the racial tensions that still stubbornly exist in this country?
You're right. They still stubbornly exist. There is no question about it. And I think anybody who has seen, one of the, I suppose a positive development is if anybody thinks that African Americans were not beaten and killed when under police custody for decades, you would be sorely mistaken. That is, of course, what has happened for decades. The difference now is a lot of that activity and those actions are being recorded on cell phones. And the whole world is seeing what the world did not see before. So here's what I think. I think that we have made progress in terms of race relations in this country, or else we would not be having an African American as president of America. We should be proud of that. But I think that anyone who does not believe that, tragically, that racism is alive and well in America, that we do not have hundreds of hate groups whose whole function in life is to pit white people against blacks and Hispanics and Jews, Catholics, anybody else, you would be mistaken. That tragedy exists. So what do we do about it? What we do about it, among other things, is make sure that we have very significant police department reform in America, okay? What that means is that not only do we have body cameras, so we know what police officers are doing, but we also have a new regimen. I think force is used too much. I saw some people here see the Sandra Bland video. Frankly, if that was a white woman, nobody believes for 1 second that would have happened. Yanked out of a car for no particular reason, thrown to the ground, assaulted, handcuffed, thrown in jail, dead 3 days later. Her crime was she failed to make a right signal on her turn. You don't get thrown in jail for failing to signal where you're turning. So what we need to do is to take a hard look at minimum sentencing right now. Mm-hmm. We have far too many people in jail for nonviolent offenses. We have more people in jail than any other country on earth. We need to take a hard look at the use of force that police departments now utilize. I think we need to take a very hard look at some of our drug laws, to be honest with you. Too many people are being arrested and sent to jail for nonviolent offenses, and I want to take a hard look at that. But at the end of the day, we have got to continue the struggle to become a non-discriminatory society where people, as Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us, are judged by their character, by who they are as people, not by the color of their skin. And that means we have to have a Justice Department being vigorous, fighting discrimination, fighting against police departments who are doing improper things to minorities. And there is an enormous amount of work to do in that area.
So you think racism is alive and well in the country?
Tragically, it is. I think it's undeniable.
Do you think some
I'm sorry.
Do you think some people running for the presidency might be a bit racist?
I think that the statement, one would hope. Look, you're never going to rid this country or the world. You stop and you think, Javier, and I did think about this recently, and I can't give you the answer. You think back to the origins of the United States, before we were a country, all right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember what the settlers, the people who came from Europe, did to the Native Americans? Mm-hmm. What atrocities were committed? And then we had the horror of slavery, and how many millions of people died and were dehumanized as a result of slavery. And then we had the attacks against Asians, and now we're seeing it against Latinos. For whatever reason, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I do not know why people apparently feel good about themselves when they're putting down and insulting other people. The statements that Donald Trump made were clearly outrageous, And it troubles me very much that a candidate for president would stoop to that level, period.
Good response. So, on to the Hispanic electorate. In 2012, it's no secret that President Obama garnered about 72% of the Hispanic vote. Now, never before has the Hispanic electorate played such a critical role in electing an American president. And I actually shared this with the president. And I went further and I said, and I believe that never again will an American president be elected without openly courting America's Hispanic vote. Consider that right now in America, every 30 seconds a Hispanic turns 18 and becomes an eligible voter. That's a potential 60,000 brand new voters every single month, and that'll be the case for the next 21 years in a row. So the question is, as president, or as a presidential candidate, what will you, Bernie Sanders, do to attract and mobilize America's Hispanic vote?
Well, we're making, on our campaign, Javier, we're making a bit of progress on that. And I think you're going to see us doing more outreach to the Latino community. And we're starting to do that. I would think that we're going to do well for two reasons. Number one, our message of social justice, a message that says that every young person in this country has a right to higher education because we're going to establish tuition-free public colleges and universities. I think that will be a popular and meaningful proposal for all people in America, but especially minority communities that are struggling economically. Our message that when youth unemployment for the Hispanic community is 36%, that rather than seeing these kids go to jail, we should invest in jobs and education. And I have legislation in that does that. I think that that will be appealing to the Hispanic community. Healthcare for all, appealing to the Hispanic community. So first point is, I think our economic agenda, which says that we have got to reach out to working class, low-income families and give them dignity, give them jobs, give them decent income, that will be a proposal I think that many Hispanic families will respond to. Second of all, obviously, there is another issue, and I guess we can get into the issue of immigration. Is this what do you want to save that one for a moment?
Let's save that one.
Okay, good.
Let's go.
All right, so I think we have an economic message that speaks to all working Americans. And given the fact that a disproportionate number of Hispanics and African Americans are struggling economically, I think it speaks even more strongly to them.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I captured the essence of the response, you would solve social issues and challenges through economic solutions.
Well, that's an important way. I mean, one cannot turn one's back on the fact that 36% of Hispanic youth are unemployed, or that millions of Hispanics don't have any health insurance or can't afford health insurance. Those are issues that have to be dealt with. Is that the only issue? We have got to break down discrimination in America. That goes without saying. And I would have a Department of Justice which would be vigorous in fighting discrimination at all levels of our society.
But now, some candidates have been accused of what I call hispandering. Specifically, do you have a track record regarding issues that you think are important to the Hispanic community?
Above and beyond the economic agenda? Well, I'll give you an example of something. And I have to be honest with you and tell you that I come from a state which is 95% white. That's the reality, and that's the state that I'm very proud to represent. We're a beautiful state.
Love Vermont.
Good, you get up there?
Absolutely.
Okay, great state. Want all of you to come on up. But I'll tell you a story, if I might. In 2007, as I recall, I learned about a horrific situation which is existing in Immokalee, Florida. Does that town mean anything to you? Immokalee, Florida is a small town near Naples, Florida, where it turns out most of the tomatoes that are used by McDonald's and Burger King and fast food restaurants, that's where the tomatoes are grown. I went to Immokalee to stand with the undocumented tomato workers who are being exploited in the most horrific manner. Because they are undocumented, they really have no legal rights as well. And if you can believe it, coincidentally, on the day that I was in Immokalee, front page story in the local paper is that a local contractor there was charged, you know what the crime he was charged with by the U.S. Attorney? Slavery. Slavery in the year 2007, because he was holding workers involuntarily and forcing them to work. That is how bad the situation was. People were getting horrendously low wages. I went to the homes there. Terrible, overcrowded shacks, working conditions abysmal. What we did, Javier, after I was there, we worked with some of the people who were supporting these workers. We held a hearing on my committee, Health, Education, Labor, which was then chaired by the late Ted Kennedy, a good friend of mine. And to make a long story short, the impact of that was, along with a lot of other effort, to improve the wages and standard of living of those workers. Okay? I'm a senator from Vermont. I did not have to do that. Didn't get me any votes back home. But I did it because it was the right thing to do, because when undocumented workers get exploited, it's not only they who suffer, but it's every worker in America.
You happen to be talking to you happen to be talking to an English as a second language son of immigrants who grew up in a migrant farm camp. So thank you for doing that. I don't get paid for my personal opinion, but that is my personal opinion. Thank you. So on to immigration. Now on immigration, our association views immigration reform as, frankly, an economic imperative that we think is critical for the continued well-being of our economy. So the question is, how do you propose that we harness the power of immigrants for our economy to continue to be the most competitive economy in the world?
Good. Excellent question. For a start, I think economically and morally, it is unacceptable that we have millions of workers who are living in the shadows. And by the way, I'm also the son of an immigrant. My dad came from Poland at the age of 17.
I heard.
Without any money at all. Here's a story. I was just in Louisiana, New Orleans, just on Sunday, actually. At the end of my remarks, a group of young Latino kids came up to me. Beautiful young lady, maybe 16, 17, tears in her eyes, saying that she is scared to death every day that she or a member of her family will be deported. Okay. So you have the moral issue of 11 million people in this country who are undocumented. Some of my Republican colleagues apparently think that the solution is, I guess, in the middle of the night to round up everybody and throw them out of the country. I mean, I think that anyone is thinking about those kinds of ideas is ugly beyond belief. Clearly, what we have got to do is provide comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Now, that is not only the right thing to do for those people in this country, but to your point, economically, it is the right thing to do. When people, workers who are undocumented, have no rights, when they're not getting the benefits and the taxes that they're paying, it impacts the whole economy to the tune of many, many, many billions of dollars. And let us also be clear on 2 points. Maybe you agree with me on this one, maybe you don't. The first point is, I'm sure you do agree with me, if suddenly every undocumented worker in this country disappeared, the economy would collapse, especially in agriculture.
Absolutely.
We all know that, all right? No great secret, it would collapse. And in many other areas, construction. The second area is, you know, people talk about illegal immigrants. Well, there's such a thing as illegal employers as well. People do not come over the border and get jobs without the full expectation that their employer understands exactly what's going on, will pay them under the table, and in fact exploit them. And I find it very interesting that many of my law and order friends, politicians, ignore that simple reality. So to your point, the economy becomes stronger when people have legal status, when people do not have to worry about being picked up and deported, where families are separated. The economy becomes stronger when people are part of our workforce, earning decent wages, spending money, holding their heads up high. So I believe as quickly as possible that we should provide legal status to undocumented workers. I think our policy should be to bring families together, not separate them. I applaud President Obama's actions, executive actions. I think we probably want to go further. We certainly, in the long run, need to demand that the Republicans in Congress stop turning their backs on this issue and pass comprehensive immigration reform.
I'd like to ask a quick follow-up. Recently, I think you criticized a portion of the Gang of Eight bill for wanting to raise the cap of H-1B visas from 65,000 to over 200,000.
Yes.
On that portion of the bill,
yes,
you do not agree.
Here's the story. When we talk about, to my mind, and argue with me if you want, but here's the way I look at it. You're the host. You could do that anyhow. You don't need my permission. I see 2 issues. I see the absolute need to provide legal status and protection to the undocumented people who are in this country right now, some 11 million people, and a path toward citizenship. I would go faster, frankly, than the bill passed in the Senate would. And I would not tie it to construction of the border and all that stuff, the border wall. But here's where I do have concerns. There is a reason why Wall Street and all of corporate America likes immigration reform. And it is not, in my view, that they are staying up nights worrying about undocumented workers in this country. What I think they are interested in is seeing a process by which we can bring low-wage labor of all levels into this country to depress wages in America. And I strongly disagree with that. I mentioned to you a moment ago that unemployment rates for kids in this country, high school kids, white 33%, Hispanic 36%, African American 51%. I frankly do not believe that we should be bringing in significant numbers of unskilled workers to compete with those kids. That's my view. I want to see these kids get jobs. And as part of that immigration bill, by the way, passed a couple of years ago, I managed to get $1.5 billion program in it for youth in this country to get jobs. Okay? So that is my view. I see it as two separate ones. H-1B, here's the story. You have many corporations who say, well, you know, I can't get the high-tech guys that I need, right? That's what they say. I think in some cases that's probably true. There may be a specialty, they can't find that worker. But on the other hand, I have talked to too many people in the high-tech industry who are saying, you know what? There are hundreds of people in this country who would like to do that work. What these corporations are doing is going outside of the country so they can pay people from Russia, Eastern Europe, lower wages than they can American high-tech people. I think that that's wrong. So if what a company has got to do, to my mind, is to say, okay, look, we've looked all over New York State, we've looked all over California, we just cannot find any high-tech worker, any engineers, any computer people. Therefore, we'll go out of the country. Fine. But first of all, you have to make sure that you've gone through an exhaustive process to make sure that people in this country can get those jobs. That is my concern.
So in your view, you think that these high-tech conglomerates want to bring immigrant labor in so that they can depress wages. Wouldn't you think, though, that maybe it's more of a training and education issue, that the young people or people who are unemployed today don't have the skill sets? Isn't this more a training and education issue than it is raising or lowering the cap on H-1Bs?
The answer is an unequivocal yes and no.
So we agree?
No. We agree that we are doing an abysmal job in educating our young people for certain types of jobs. I have no doubt, and I know for a fact, I see it in Vermont and it's true all over this country, there are highly skilled, good-paying jobs that our educational system has not enabled young Americans to get. That's true, and I accept that. On the other hand, what I will tell you, that there are corporations who would prefer to bring people, high-tech skilled people from Russia and other countries into America at lower wages rather than pay an American worker a higher wage.
Let's move on. Mr. Senator, is there one differentiating issue in your platform that you think truly distinguishes you and gives you the best chance to connect with voters in this country?
The best chance to?
To connect with voters in this country.
Yeah, I do. If you check my record, and I urge people to do so, throughout my political life, when I was mayor of the city of Burlington, when I was a member of Congress in the United States Senate, I have taken on virtually every powerful special interest in this country. I've taken on the private health insurance companies. I've taken on the pharmaceutical industry, took people from my state over the Canadian border to purchase medicine at 1/10 the price that women in Vermont were paying for breast cancer drugs, taken on the military industrial complex where you have weapon systems that had huge cost overruns, huge frauds. I helped lead the effort against the greed of Wall Street. And I think, and on it goes, I think that at this particular moment in American history, where so few have so much wealth and so much power, that if we are going to expand the middle class rather than see it shrink, if we're going to make sure that all of our kids in this country get a good education and are able to get a higher education regardless of their income. If we are going to provide health care and family and medical leave to all of our people as a right, if we're going to create the kind of nation that allows all of our people to have a decent standard of living with decent jobs and decent income, we need leadership now that is prepared to take on the billionaire class. And I know that sounds kind of scary, but what you have right now are, in my view, Javier, I know that not everybody agrees with me, but in my view, you have a handful, a small number of people with incredible wealth and incredible power who not only have huge control over the economy, but as a result of Citizens United, huge control over the political process. You tell me, or anybody else can tell me, how would you define a political system in which one family, the Koch brothers, worth about $85 billion, will spend more money in this election cycle than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? One family. Does that sound like democracy to you? It does not. To me, it sounds like oligarchy. And what we have got to do is to rally the American people to say enough is enough. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We can provide health care and a decent standard of living to all of our people. But in order to accomplish that, we cannot be naive. And what I have said, Javier, over and over again in my campaign, it's not just about electing Bernie Sanders to be president. I can't do anything, or very little, unless there is a movement of people behind me prepared to stand up to these very, very powerful people. So that is where I think it's not only the agenda that I've outlined to you, which is different than other candidates, but it is the belief that we need a mass political movement. If 80% of young people do not vote as they didn't vote in the last election, if 63% of the American people don't vote, you're not going to see any change in this country, regardless who is president.
As a follow-up to that, hypothetically, let's say that you continue to gain momentum in the coming months, but in the end you find yourself on the heels of Hillary, but still end up falling short of the nomination. Do you feel that you owe it to those people and to your supporters who feel very strongly about you? I mean, it's pretty clear they feel the burn. If they called upon you.
And it looks like we have a few in the room as well.
I think you, if they called upon you, would you run as an independent?
No, no. The answer is no. And here's why. I am the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. And as I was contemplating what to do, one of the decisions that I had to make, and there were a lot of people who said, Bernie, you know, you are an independent. The Republican Party is an extreme right-wing party. The Democratic Party is too conservative, too cozied up with big money and corporate America. You got to run outside of the two-party system. And I thought about it. But I reached the decision, which I think was the proper decision, that for a lot of reasons, the only way at this particular moment in history that we can run an effective campaign was within the Democratic primary and caucus process, and that's what we're doing. So to answer your question, if it happens that I do not win that process, would I run outside of the system? No, I made the promise that I would not, and I'll keep that promise. And let me add to that, and the reason for that is I do not want to be responsible for electing some right-wing Republican to be president of the United States of America.
So Senator, thanks again for spending time with us today. And to end today's discussion, I want to ask a final question. Now, you've compared our nation's shortcomings when it comes to issues like public health care, public education, taxes, and other things. You've compared us to nations like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and we come up short just about on every front. But to put things in a different context, according to our information, Ohio's economy at about $575 billion is slightly larger than Norway's. North Carolina's at a little bit over $500 billion is slightly larger than Denmark's. And Indiana's at $342 billion is slightly larger as well. So if you look at the total US GDP, we're at about 17.5 trillion. And if you took Denmark, Norway, and Sweden and stuck them inside of America, you could shake it around and it would roll around in there like a coconut in a rail car. Is it fair to compare our nation with our complexity and our GDP to nations like Norway, Sweden? And by the way, I love Norway, I love Sweden, but do you think that's a fair comparison?
And that's a good question. And obviously, and let me add to it, we are a far more diverse nation than are the Scandinavian countries, who are having their problems with immigration, as you know. But it's not a question of the size of the GDP, and you're of course right. The United States has a huge economy. The question is a vision. So I would say to you, Javier, that no matter the size of the country or the complexity of our economy, should we have the highest rate of childhood poverty, almost 20%, of any other Western industrialized country. So I don't care about the complexity or the size. I don't think we have got to do that. But let me also, should we be the only country? Is it impossible for a large country to have a healthcare system that guarantees healthcare to all people? I live in Burlington, Vermont. I am 100 miles away, or an hour away, I should say, unless you drive really fast, about an hour away from the Canadian border. Now, we are much larger than Canada, but Canada is not a small country. They have had a national healthcare system, single-payer system, for many decades, which works pretty well. UK is not a rinky-dink little country. They have more or less a socialized healthcare system, which the people of that country are pretty proud of. So to answer your question, I'm not comparing the size and the complexity of America's economy with Sweden or Denmark. I'm talking about a vision of where we want to go. And I believe that if we had the political will, we could guarantee health care to all people as a right. We certainly could have family and medical leave, paid vacation time, paid sick time. And I think we can also have a much fairer tax system, which would result in a lot less income and wealth inequality than we have right now.
Good response. I think we have just a little bit of time for a couple of questions from the audience. Are you comfortable with that? Any questions from the folks in the audience? Why don't we begin with this young man in the white shirt right here?
Your emphasis on building jobs and putting people back to work, does that have to come at the expense of your environmental plan that you've also laid out?
Good question.
You've been pretty vocal about the
Right. Great question. Great question. Everyone hear the question? Is there a contradiction between creating jobs and protecting the environment? So let me repeat what I said to Javier a few moments ago, that I believe that we have got to be extraordinarily bold and aggressive in dealing with climate change. But I also believe, in fact, that it is not a contradiction to be talking about rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. For example, among other things, if you have a strong rail system, you know what that will do? That can take a lot of trucks off of the road and create a much more energy efficient transportation system. When you weatherize homes, as we're doing in Vermont, you are creating jobs and making massive cuts in carbon emissions. So I don't see a contradiction. I think that we can move aggressively toward sustainable energy and energy efficiency, and in fact create jobs in doing that, while at the same time we are effectively combating climate change.
Is Dan, where's Dan from CNN? I can't, Dan?
Senator.
Hi, sir.
I want to ask you about the 2007 Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill you voted against.
Right.
But at the time, you said, I'm going to quote you, the bill says we must strengthen our borders and not allow people to so easily come into the country. That is long overdue and it's absolute right. Why did you say that back then when now you're saying that you wouldn't tie immigration reform to building a wall or anything about personal?
Well, there's the very significant difference in scope of what the recent bill does compared to what that bill does. My concern about the bill that I voted against has to do with exactly what Javier and I discussed a few moments ago. And that is that there was too much emphasis on bringing low-wage workers into this country, okay? What I want to see and what is better about the recent bill is, number one, that there is a path towards citizenship which is absolutely essential. And second of all, that I was able to get a fairly significant amount of money into providing jobs for young people in this country. And that is the difference between, among other things, those two pieces of legislation.
How about Luis Alonso? I can't. Luis, what's from Associated Press?
Yes, hi, many thanks. I would like to ask you about foreign policy. If you could please talk about concrete initiatives you have in mind
Good.
for Western Hemisphere, in
Okay.
particular for Latin America. What are the big
Good.
trends you see, and what you have in mind?
Well, as I mentioned to Javier, I voted against NAFTA for a number of reasons. But by the way, in my view, if you look at the impact that NAFTA has had on Mexico, one of the impacts that it has had that we have got to own up to is massive dislocation of small farms in Mexico and driving a lot of workers off of those farms into the cities and into very bad situations. Second of all, I will tell you that I am concerned when I see how aggressive China has been in moving all over the world. Obviously, Latin America is our neighbor, and I am not impressed to the degree that we have been reaching out with Latin America. I support very strongly the President's initiative in normalizing relations with Cuba. I think that's a step forward. But I think that to a too significant degree, we have ignored those people who are closest to us. And I think we've got to work with them in intelligent ways to improve their economies. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that what we have seen in Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras, the kind of violence and mob rule there, resulting in kids having to flee, that is something that the United States has to pay attention to. Lastly, broadly speaking, on foreign policy, I voted against the war in Iraq. I think history will record that as the right vote. And if you read some of my speeches at that point, much of what I feared would happen, in fact, did happen in terms of the destabilization of that region.
Alex Seitz-Walls with MSNBC.
Hi, Senator. On immigration again, Forward Us responded.
Can you, a little bit louder, Alex.
Forward Us, which is a pro-immigration reform
Yeah.
group backed by tech companies and some tech entrepreneurs, responding to your Vox interview yesterday, a very tough statement. They say in the headline that you are wrong on immigrants. They say that your statements are troubling, that you falsely pit immigrants as obstacles to tackling unemployment, and they're just plain wrong. So how do you respond to that, and do you think that immigrants can take jobs from Americans?
Well, you got to be careful about defining the word immigrants. What they are talking about is completely opening up the border. That was the question. Should we have a completely open border so that anybody can come into the United States of America? If that were to happen, which I strongly disagree with, there is no question in my mind that that would substantially lower wages in this country. When you have 36% of Hispanic kids in this country who can't find jobs, and you bring a lot of unskilled workers into this country, what do you think happens to that 36% of kids who are today unemployed? 51% of African American kids. I don't think there's any candidate for president, none, who thinks that we should open up the borders and not see that as having a negative impact. So to my mind is, what do we do and how do we address the problem of 11 million undocumented people in this country today? We move aggressively toward a path toward citizenship. We move as fast as we can to legal status. We provide protection for those people. But to simply open the borders of America, do you think there is any candidate for president who thinks that that makes sense? I don't think so, nor do I.
Elise Foley with Huffington Post.
Hi, Senator. I actually wanted to follow up on Alex's question, just more narrowly than open borders, since as you said, nobody's even really proposing that. Do you believe economists are wrong that say that immigration improves the economy and actually contributes to American jobs? Do you believe that that's wrong? And do you think the legal immigration should be restricted?
Do I think that illegal immigration should be restricted? No, I don't. No. The question that I was asked is essentially an open borders. And I certainly do not agree with that. My father was an immigrant. Immigrants have built this country. Javier's dad was an immigrant?
Yeah.
That is one of the virtues of America, that we have people coming from all over the world with their own particular set of skills and ideas. That is what makes America a unique country on earth, something that we should be very, very proud of. But there is a great difference in saying that we welcome immigrants, that we're going to provide a path towards citizenship for those people and those families that are in this country today, than saying, oh, we're not going to have any borders at all.
I think we agree on one more thing, that immigrants make America more American.
They do. That is a huge part of what makes this country great.
Senator, closing thoughts.
Well, first of all, my closing thought is to thank you very much for inviting me here today, and thank you for all the work you and the organization are doing. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. Let me just conclude by saying this, and Javier just, I think, hit the nail on the head. We are a great country, because my dad comes from Poland, and your family came from?
Mexico.
Came from Mexico. And we have, my wife's family came from Ireland, and we have people whose families came from Africa way back when and from all over the world. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. And we bring those energies and those ideas and those cultures together. We make this a very, very unique country. But I think that today, this country faces some huge problems having to do with income and wealth inequality and a disappearing middle class. But I have absolute confidence that if we stand together and not let folks out there divide us, because your family came from Mexico and my family came from Poland, not divide us because you're a woman and he's a man, then you're black and he's white, then you're gay and you're heterosexual. If we prevent them from dividing us up on those bases, and we stand together to say, you know what, all of our kids deserve the right to go to college regardless of their income. All of us deserve health care. Yes, we are going to combat climate change. No, we're not going to have a campaign finance system that allows billionaires to buy elections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we stand together, the future of this country is extraordinary. If we allow them to divide us, I worry very much about our future. So, Javier, thank you so much for what you're doing, and I enjoyed being with you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you very much.